Okay, so welcome to a live recording of the Briefing Note podcast. This is a very special episode because I have a very special guest. Chrystia Freeland is here with me in the store, and we're recording this episode in front of a live audience of people. I should have said also to you, like you can react, like you can, it's not that you need to keep yourselves quiet. And so we're just going to jump into the conversation because I know people are really excited to see you and hear from you. And there's so much that we could cover. I'm not sure if you heard. Maybe I'm just going to jump in and we're going to go super serious right away because I want to get your take on this. The U.S. Defense Secretary this morning Pete Hegseth said that Ukraine's peace goals are, quote, unrealistic. You have a special connection to Ukraine and in advocating for the people and being Ukrainian yourself, Ukrainian Canadian. What do you have to say about this? And what would you, given the opportunity to win the leadership contest of the federal Liberals, what would your approach be in that conversation?
Thanks for the question, Sarah. Truly, I did see that. My starting point is the people who decide the future of Ukraine are Ukrainians. And it has been really magnificent how the whole country has just made a decision to say, we're going to be a democracy. We're not going to let a dictatorship take us over. Our sovereignty matters to us, and we're going to stand for it and fight for it. And I still remember so clearly, just before the war and then right after the war started, the opinion of all the smart military people in Canada and the world was that Kyiv would stand for 3 weeks at most. All the smart generals in the world thought that Kyiv would fall in 3 weeks would be the maximum they could hold out. And all those smart generals have turned out to be wrong. Because it turns out, and I find this incredibly moving, that when people are united and determined and are working together collaboratively, they can do astonishing things. So the first thing I would say is it's up to Ukrainians. Second thing, is like, thank you for mentioning that I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Yes. And of course, I have a personal connection, as do many Canadians. But the reason for Canada to stand with Ukraine is not that personal connection. It's because of what is at stake there. And a Ukrainian victory in this war makes us much more secure. A Ukrainian victory means that democracy can defeat dictatorship. It means that the rules-based order holds. And the opposite is also true. If Putin wins, it means that dictatorship defeats democracy. And it means that all of those rules that were put in place, so painstakingly after the Second World War, that haven't been perfect, of course, but that certainly for us in the G7 in Canada have guaranteed so much peace and prosperity. It would mean that those rules are over, that borders are no longer sacrosanct. And I think we as Canadians have some fresh reasons to believe it's important for international borders to be sacrosanct. So we have a real stake in Ukraine's victory and in Putin's defeat. And we have to be clear about that too. And then the final thing I would say is Ukraine's long-term security will be guaranteed by Ukrainian membership in NATO. And I certainly support that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you already touched on the parallels that I hope I'm not alone in seeing, looking at eyes in the room too, given Trump's talk about making Canada the 51st state, it's haunting in a way, right? That, he would potentially replicate, the situation in Ukraine in an economic warfare, not using traditional warfare. So, I want people to be paying attention to those kinds of things more broadly, because there's a lot at stake right now. But, threading the needle between, what's happening in Ukraine and Trump and here. And, there are some very powerful men in the world who don't like you very much. I'm not sure you obviously know this.
I've been told.
Yeah, it's been told.
There are some great, strong women in the world who like me and with whom I love working.
Yes. But I mean, I see their dislike of you as a badge of honor. I hope you do too. And it's interesting that because it was reported in the media that, well, I think Trump said actually that, you're a nasty woman, which puts you in a really good club of very distinguished women with whom he doesn't like. But, I think also understanding your background makes me, there are many reasons why to like you, but I wanted to going back a little bit in the history that ties into the Ukraine. The Soviet authorities had things to say about you when you're in your younger years. And for anyone who doesn't know the back history of the story is so fascinating. I really recommend you go and learn more about this person that's in front of us. But, Moscow had sent Canada a telegram at one point that said, quote, "Your national is a well-known troublemaker and you should keep better control over your citizens." Referring to you.
I was still in university, showing early promise in the troublemaking space.
Right. So you came to your troublemaking very early on in life. And, I hope I can be as much, a troublemaker in some of the same ways that you have been, because I want more women to follow this path of troublemaking. How do you
look? Yeah, here we are. Well-behaved women rarely make history. That's a motto to live by.
Right. And so now you're running to be the next Prime Minister of Canada and the next leader of the federal Liberal Party. So, maybe the troublemaker aspect of you is, one side of your personality, but on the other side, of how you approach government and governing and leading, what would your approach be right now to taking on Trump and leading Canada on the world stage?
Can I talk about the troublemaking for a moment? Because you started there, Sarah, and I think it's actually really important. I think it's maybe especially important for women because there can be so much pressure on us to be good girls. And it's important to be prepared to have the courage of your convictions. But I think it's especially important in this moment because there are moments in history that are pivotal moments where disruptive things are happening. And I think it's pretty clear to all of us, we are living through such a moment. One of the reasons that I'm running to be leader of the Liberal Party and the next Prime Minister is because when I look back on my own life, I think what my life has been characterized by is an ability to recognize those moments and to take action in those moments, to take personal risks, to get involved and to do something in those moments. And this is such a moment for Canada. It's not a moment when there's any, you can't go by the textbook because there is no textbook. It's a moment when we have to realize that the rules are changing, that global relationships are changing. We have to be able to recognize that. We have to be able to then think clearly about how does Canada get through this? And how does Canada in this crisis find opportunity? And I think a willingness to sometimes not be well behaved, to sometimes be a troublemaker, to recognize when you're at that hinge moment in history, I think it's really important. And I do think that that's a quality that I have.
100%. I completely agree. I think you make bold moves. And I think, we wouldn't even be here today. There wouldn't be a leadership contest if you hadn't taken one specific bold move that did just what you just described. We would still be living with the status quo otherwise. I thought it was really interesting. I heard one of your colleagues speak a couple of weeks ago at an event, and they framed it in a way that the prime minister made a decision to step down. And I thought that was a interesting take because what was missing from that context was what led him to make that decision, which was your resignation as deputy prime minister and the minister of finance in my personally will describe was a masterclass in resignation letters. It was just brilliant. And so we wouldn't be here if you hadn't done that. And it was what we needed as a country, and it was what the Liberals needed as a party. And I don't know if anyone else has said this, but like, seriously, thank you for doing that. Because it was long overdue. And you are giving Canada a chance to reset itself domestically and internationally, as well as the Liberal Party, right? And polling is picking up a little bit. So none of that would have happened without you. So thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that, Sarah. And, I'm having so much fun in this leadership race. And, much more fun than I thought was allowed in work. And I think the reason I'm having so much fun is, for me, it's a real personal liberation. It's really fun to be able to be fully my true self, to be leading a campaign where we're really saying the things we believe, and where I'm really able to say to Liberals and to Canadians, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I think the country needs. And that is just so liberating. So I am loving that. And the other thing that I am really loving is I do feel this is a moment of empowerment for Liberals and maybe for all Canadians. And certainly within the party, one of the things that I am enjoying so much is I feel, for the first time in a long time, people are feeling energized. People are feeling a sense of renewal, a sense of opportunity, and crucially, a sense that grassroots Liberals matter. And when I reflect on things, when I reflect on the past, and I think about how I would like to do things going forward, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is we need to rebuild the party, and we need to empower grassroots Liberals. We can't have a situation where the only person who decides how long a leader stays on is the leader, him or herself. We need grassroots Liberals to be in charge. And a really good way to figure out who is in charge is who has the authority to fire you. I find that concentrates the mind. And so I think it's really important. And one of the things I've committed to is saying grassroots Liberals, if I am chosen as leader, one of the first things I'll do is say to Liberals, say to the party, the membership needs to figure out what is a leadership review mechanism, and we need to put that in place. And I think that will make us a much stronger party. And when we are in government, a much better government, because it will mean that it's not just about one person or a few people. It's about a whole party across the country, and it's about really listening to people. And so we've been talking about me and about leadership, and I believe in that. I don't abdicate responsibility for leadership, and actually I enjoy it. But I think what we need right now in the Liberal Party and in Canada is leadership which is very inclusive and very collaborative. We need a kind of, right now, a whole of party effort. And then we're going to need a whole of country effort to be successful in this moment. We talked a little bit about Ukraine at the beginning. And one of the reasons that the Ukrainians are doing so well is this is a grassroots war, if you can describe it that way. People are just figuring stuff out for themselves. They're building drones in their basement. There was a famous episode where a Ukrainian woman actually downed a Russian drone by throwing a jar of tomatoes from her balcony. True story. So it's really about people being powerful and taking responsibility for their country and themselves, and a structure, a leadership structure that encourages that. And I think that's the kind of party we need. And I think that's the kind of country we need. I think we can stand up to Donald Trump and we can fight for Canada, but we're going to have to, the way we're going to be successful is if everybody in the country is doing it.
So how do we, yes.
And Canadians, I just want to say one more thing, Sarah.
Yeah.
People want to, right? Like one of the things I loved on February 1st was this spontaneous and unanimous, like rising up in the country and everyone saying, you know, I'm going to buy Canadian. I'm not going to buy American booze. I'm not going to go on holiday to the US. You go to the grocery store, people are suddenly like reading the labels really carefully. You see like displays saying this is the Canadian stuff. And no one told Canadians to do that. Canadians, we just all recognize like we have a great country. We really love our country. We do not have an inferiority complex vis-a-vis the United States, quite the contrary. And we're not going to be the 51st state. And each one of us, you know, in all the actions that we control, is going to fight for that. And I think that if we can have a leadership that harnesses that desire of every single Canadian, we are going to be unbeatable.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to, you know, renew that sense of pride in being Canadian and how, we don't want to be American because we're, you know, for many reasons, but we're just not American, right? We're just not.
Partly just because we're not.
Yeah, exactly. We're just not. And it's a good for you, not for me moment, right? And I hope we all can have that. Like, I'm happy that Americans can be American and whatever that means for them, but I'm not. I'm Canadian. And that's, you know, how I want to remain. So, you know, what would a government look like? You talked about on the party side, what as a leadership style and bringing Canadians together, which I do think needs to happen. We're pretty splintered at the moment. And Pierre Poilievre is, I think, rapidly changing his tune on a lot of different messages, and has really kind of, it's no longer the time for the divisiveness in his messages. So I think he's gotten on board maybe with the proud to be Canadian movement, which I'm happy to see. But what was your plan to bring people together? How to bring Canadians together?
Okay, we have 10 hours, right?
Only joking. Yeah, small question.
I'll share a few thoughts.
Yeah.
So the first one is, I do really think this is a moment when we need to find ways to emphasize what unites us rather than what divides us, and where differences are unbridgeable, to be able to talk and to be able to recognize the thing that I think unites every single Canadian, which is we believe in our country and we're going to fight for our country. And, being an Albertan and actually being from a small town in northern Alberta, I'm really familiar with being in a community where being a Liberal is to be a minority, perhaps an extreme minority. And I went back to Peace River at the end of last week with my dad, spent some time in the town where I was born and grew up. And we did a sort of we had sort of supper with some Liberals and just also old family friends on Friday night. And one of the things that gave me the greatest pleasure was, it wasn't a fundraiser, but I said a few words and then a few people did write checks, and a few people who wrote checks wouldn't write in Liberal Party on the check. Okay. They made me do it because they said, I cannot physically bring myself to do that. That is the kind of friends we have in Peace River. And we're told that every single person here has friends like that too. really dear friends, people who've known me since I was a baby, or who I've known since they were babies. And to me, being able to have that kind of a conversation and that kind of support, it's really deeply meaningful to me. And I think as a country, we need to be able to have that kind of a conversation. And I think, Donald Trump, I hate to say this, is helping us in a way. He's helping us to discover how much we love Canada. He's helping us to discover that what unites us is much greater than what divides us. And I think he's helping us to discover that, we 40 million can be amazing and can be amazingly successful. But the way we're going to have to do it is by finding ways to work together. And I know that I can do that because of my experience during the NAFTA negotiations. One of the things that was maybe less visible, but was really important in those negotiations, was the work we did to unite the home team. And someone who is a truly great Canadian, we should have statues of this guy across the country, is a guy called Steve Verheuvel. Jill knows who I'm talking about. He was our lead negotiator for NAFTA and lead negotiator the Trail with Europe. And he is truly brilliant, 100% dedicated to Canada. And he said to me when I first became trade minister and we were dealing with the Europeans, he said, what you need to understand is the most important part of any trade negotiation is uniting the home team. And where trade negotiations fail is if the home team is not united. So spend time before we really get started doing that homework. And actually, with CETA, the European trade deal, the reason it almost failed is because the Europeans hadn't done the work of uniting their home team. So we had to kind of help them. But with NAFTA, I learned that lesson, and we spent so much time working with provinces and territories, working with businesses, working with labor leaders, working with Indigenous leaders, putting together a NAFTA council that included conservatives. Rona Ambrose and James Moore were on it, that included people from the NDP. Brian Topp was on it. Perry Bellegarde was on it, Indigenous leader, union leaders, Hassan Youssef, business leaders. We met a lot. I think people maybe thought joining the council was going to be like something they put on their CV. Then they realized it was like real work. But that work to keep us together really made it possible when the negotiation hit some tough moments. And I think it is that kind of work and that kind of approach that Canada needs. It is not always sexy. And it's not always macho, right? Like it can be quite macho to go out there and have a fight and have a confrontation. And sometimes you need to have a fight and a confrontation. We have to stand up to Putin. We have to stand up to Trump. But I think in our own country, we really have to emphasize trying to build that united coalition of the home team, as we did during NAFTA, and actually as we did during COVID. I think a person looking at me and looking at Doug Ford would not automatically say that we are kindred spirits, right? But we really became good friends.
Do you guys text?
Yes, we do. We actually do reasonably often.
Really?
Yes.
Like
yes.
spur of the moment, like, I wonder what Doug's doing.
But emojis and images
really?
are sometimes involved. Yeah.
Really?
Truly.
To be a part of that text group.
Yeah.
Wow, I wish. Yeah, that sounds, I love that for Canada and for you and Doug, and Doug's having a moment, he's definitely having a moment. And, I think that, it is a winning political strategy to some degree, actually, to champion Canada. It's something that, we need to see more of. You mentioned at one point about the Prime Minister, being in a gendered way, himself or herself, moving the conversation along to what could be a history making moment for Canada. And as someone who has spent a lot of time unpacking the results of the American election in the context of, so it's kind of died down now, but the reasons why Kamala Harris wasn't able to cross that line, and can we still talk and champion women in politics openly without it being actually, people taking issue with that and being like, well, I'm not going to vote for her just because, she's talking about being a woman. It was never, I don't think, really, about that. But have you thought about how you present yourself? Like, is that, it would be, we have had one woman be prime minister in this exact same way, actually, Kim Campbell, and had then quickly went into a general election. And her party, the PCs at the time, were deeply unpopular and they were obliterated. And something I've been talking about right now, or even before Trudeau stepped down, was the glass cliff, and how I don't want that moment for the woman for a woman that inherits the leadership of the Liberal Party. But in unpacking that moment, the gendered aspect of politics right now, the backlash into so many different things, how do you move through the world and move through this campaign, championing women and people in politics, knowing that this could be another moment in Canadian history where we could have a woman in the Prime Minister's office again?
Okay, again, another 10-hour
Yes.
question. I'm going to say a few things. So the very most basic thing I want to start by saying, and this is such an inspiring place to be, with all the logos and the books and the messages. The very most basic thing to say, and here there's a little sticker. A woman's place is wherever she wants to be. That is just true. This is 2025. We have to not just believe, but profoundly recognize women can and should and must be able to do anything. And that really especially has to be our message to our daughters. Really, really important. And I can't even believe I'm saying that, because I was raised by a feminist mother in the late 60s and early 70s. And I could see all her barriers. Imagine being a woman lawyer in Peace River in the early 70s. Imagine going to law school at the U of A in the late 60s. Really hard. And the discrimination was evident and visible even to a child. But I definitely grew up assuming, and my mother sharing that assumption, that her generation was going to be the one that had to deal with all of this stuff, and they would kind of take care of it and it would be fine for us. So I just want to say, let's make it fine, right? Yeah. Let's make it fine for our daughters. That's my first thought. Second thing I'll say is a woman who I really admire is Janet Yellen. She is smart and hardworking, and just full of integrity. And one of the great pleasures of being finance minister was to be, with her in the G7 and work with her on things together we got a huge historic thing done, which is $50 billion of Russian assets transferred to Ukraine using the frozen Russian assets as collateral. Really big deal. Think about it. $50 billion, huge amount of money. And we didn't have to pay a penny. It's Putin's money that we got to the Ukrainians. And Janet asked me to be the person who introduced her. I think it was last year when she got a big award. And in my sort of little remarks introducing her, I quoted this line from Boswell's Life of Johnson, where he says, a woman preaching is like a dog walking on his two legs. You are so struck by the action that you don't even think about the quality of the performance. And I quoted that to say about Janet, that sometimes when you say first woman finance minister, first woman secretary of the treasury, which is something said a lot about Janet and I guess about me, it can almost be a backhanded compliment, because the point is that your gender is the principal quality you bring to the role rather than doing the goddamn job.
Yeah.
And so for myself, in all the jobs I've done, whether it was being Moscow bureau chief when I was 26, or whether it was, negotiating NAFTA, what I kind of offer up to Canadians is to say, I'm going to be really good at this. Okay. I'm going to work harder than anybody you've ever seen. And I'm going to be smart about it. And I'm going to be nice and collaborative about it. And I'm going to get the job done for you. That's the first thing that I want to say. And that's what, that's what I'm kind of offering to you guys when I say, please pick me as the next leader of the Liberal Party and the next prime minister. So I think that is the central thing. I do think, you're right, Sarah, to raise the issue, because part of what's happening in the world today is a backlash against women. And that is not okay. And we have to not be bullied into acting as if there's something bad about saying you're a feminist. That there's something bad about saying, I'm really proud that we have put in place a system of $10 a day daycare. About saying that especially helps women. Because look, the reality is still that when two parents can't afford childcare, it's the mother who ends up staying at home. So we have to be, totally unabashed and proud to say those things. And then the final thing I'll say, and this I really believe in my heart, I actually think a frontier place like Alberta, a pioneer place like Alberta, is a great place for women. And it's a great place for strong women. It is not an accident that it was in the West that women first got the vote, and that the advocates for women's suffrage came from the West. Because on the frontier, you didn't have time to just have half the people working hard and able to do stuff. You needed all the people to do it. Alberta has now had 3 women premiers. Mm-hmm. Yay, Alberta. Like, wow, Alberta feminist province. Alberta Alberta of itself.
Yes, but that's a fraught conversation.
But that is an actual reality that 3 women have been chosen to lead this province.
And that we're the first in Canada to have it happen.
Yeah. And I say, yay, Alberta. And I'm proud of Alberta. And I don't think that's an accident. Like the Peace Country, it's like the frontier edge of the frontier. And I, really grew up, and in a place where there were strong men who wanted to have strong women there too, because that was how you made it. That was how you survived. And that's, to me, that is Alberta. And that needs to be Canada too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think everybody needs to be at the table.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how we win.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We don't win if not everybody's at the table. We'll wrap things up, but I thought it was interesting. What I wanted to maybe kind of end things with was a quote actually from Brian Mulrooney about you. And he said, I know, surprise. No one saw that coming, did you? This is what he said about you. We're dealing with a woman of substance here. She's going to be a big player no matter what. And, coming from someone, and this was, before he passed away, actually, you are a woman of substance and you've done so much for our country, whether people realize it or not. Even the people who are, maybe not shouting down thank yous, but other things from time to time. they benefit from the work that you've done advocating for Canada as finance minister and trade in every portfolio that you've been in. You know, I really hope that your substance is put to use in this next chapter, with you, leading Canada. Because I'll say, I think that what your resignation, I hope, has empowered and given permission to more women to say, you know what, I'm just not going to take this anymore. And I'm going to do something that's really difficult, is actually going to be likely detrimental to myself, requires some enormous sacrifice. But, I'm going to ask for more. I'm going to go for that job. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to say, this doesn't work anymore. It doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve others anymore. That is the substance that you bring in so many different ways. So, I'm really hoping this works out.
Me too.
I'm really hoping this works out for you. And, the leadership vote is on March 9th, and you want to be people's number one pick, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. It's a historic moment. It's a critical moment for our country. And I am really running because I have a deep conviction that I am the leader Canada needs right now.
Mm-hmm.
I have a plan. I have the experience to deliver on that plan, and I have the guts to do it. And it's going to take all of that. And I know Canada can win. I know that a lot of people are scared. And what I would say to us is take it really seriously. Do not downplay the seriousness of this moment, but let's not be scared. Let's know our own strength. And let's get through this crisis and use it as an opportunity to be even better. And I know we can do it.
Well, and also something that's coming up before the vote on March 9th is there are going to be 2 debates, one in French, the first night, and then the second night is in English. Have you already started debate prep?
Oui, un petit peu. Le français, c'est le plus difficile.
Right.
Alors, oui. Yes.
Okay.
If people have any ideas, please share.
Yeah. Well, I think that will be a must watch, probably both, even like me, for people who aren't fluent in French, but to see you all up there. And then the English debate as well. But
I had called for 4 debates.
Yeah.
I think the debates are really important. We are choosing the next leader of the Liberal Party and the next prime minister, someone who will need to be battle tested. They will need to deal with Trump right away, and they will need to face Polyev in election very soon. I am battle tested. I have the scars to prove it. And I wish we were having 4 debates, because I think it would be good for Canadians to really see what the options are. And please do watch the debates. I'm going to work hard to prepare and do my best.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, to that point, there is one leadership, well, I guess more than one. But, there is someone who is a strong contender who hasn't, been in government before in this way. A question that I would like you to ask him is, if does he plan on running if he doesn't win the leadership of the federal Liberal Party? And then also, assuming the outcome of the election isn't the one that you're hoping for in a general, would he also continue to stick around?
I can answer that question for myself.
Yes,
and
please.
I have said that I think that all leadership candidates should commit to running in the next federal election. I think if you think you're good enough to be leader and prime minister, you're good enough to run to be an MP. And we need all strong Liberals and all strong voices. And I committed when I stepped down from cabinet that no matter what the outcome, I will run. And I will. And look, my objective is to win the leadership, to be the next prime minister, to lead Canada in a really challenging time with the US. My plan A would be to stand up right away in the House of Commons. I have a seat in the House of Commons. I've been elected 4 times. I can stand up in the front benches and seek the confidence of the Commons. And my plan would be to do that and to say to MPs and to all the Canadians they represent, let's focus on fighting for Canada right now. We have an election, and that is a good thing. We need a democratic mandate, but that election is in October. And let's focus right now on having a stable government coming together, fighting for Canada. We have steel and aluminum tariffs due to come into effect on the 12th of March. So if I am chosen as leader and the next prime minister, I will seek to form a government that gets through this, that can stand up to Trump and really present a united front until an October election. And I think there would be a lot of support across the country. I think there would be support from the premiers for us to do that.
Yeah, most of them.
Most of them. Try to win them all over. At the end of the day, tariffs hurt everybody.
Yes.
And having that kind of strong, stable government would be really important. So that is my objective. And my objective would then be to win the next election. You need a plan B, though. And certainly my commitment to the Liberal Party, to Liberal Party members, is if I'm chosen as leader, if I will stick around and, provided the membership wants me to, because if I'm chosen as leader, I will put in a leadership review mechanism or allow give the membership the opportunity to put a leadership review mechanism in place. And if the leadership wanted me to stick around, I absolutely would. And I think there is a lot of exciting and important work to be done rebuilding the party. And I'm very much up for it.
Well, I think, there'd be a great place for Mark Carney and a Chrystia Freeland government.
I have already said, on Tout le monde en parle, that I would be delighted to have him serve as finance minister in my government. And I really mean it.
Yeah.
I think he's, shown that he has served in appointed positions. And I think he would do a really good job.
Yeah. With you at the helm.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you for having this conversation with me. And we're going to end this now, and then we'll move to taking some questions from the audience after.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
Thank you.